another thing that I really liked about the book was your use of analogies. I'm a big fan, right? I mean, it's very relatable, and I think that's good for the audience that you intended this for. I want to dive into that just a little bit. You had used the seatbelt analogy at one point, I think early on in the book, and I think the initial challenge with seatbelts, right, was to get the government to regulate the use of seatbelts. So then we did that. Then I think the next challenge became getting people to actually use them, right? And so now we're starting to see these parallels. And then now it's back to the car makers, like how do we engineer and design the best possible seatbelt? So my question to kind of dig a little bit deeper is how do you guys translate that to cybersecurity? And kind of to your point, Paul, like we are trying to build a better mousetrap, right? And so, I mean, what are your thoughts on that, like making that parallel?
Sure. Moudy, you want to take that or Shai?
I mean, I think I was, I think I would focus on a couple things. In my mind, while Paul, you were saying, there's a lot of players, there's definitely a lot in the marketplace. And I certainly, and this is probably one of my biggest ahas from the book process, was that the real principle, and kind of for the listeners of this podcast today, if there's anything I could just say, it's that practice the fundamentals every single day is the best way to go. Okay, there's all the sizzle, there's all these amazing things. Everything has the word AI in it, everything has the word machine learning in it, all this stuff. But what it comes down to, it for me at least, is it's, if you want to use a basketball analogy or the seatbelt analogy, right? Just to stick with the seatbelt analogy, it really is about, you could save a lot of lives by just buckling the damn seatbelt every single time, consistently buckling the seatbelt. Right now, could you get fancy in the Mercedes S-Class? The seatbelt comes, it runs by itself, and basically you don't have to pull it yourself. Yeah, because it's like so important that you can't grab it yourself. It grabs it for you. It's like, okay, sure, like do that. But the fundamental thing is just put the seatbelt on. Whether it has a nice fluffy thing in the middle of it, So I think in security, I think there's many ways there's a lot of tools you can buy. There's a lot of confusion. There's all these things, but the fundamentals that we go into in the book to me, like that's 80 or 90% of the battle, right? And a lot of the breaches we see, there was like one of the fundamentals, you guys. It wasn't like, so in my mind, and this is where I'm curious to see if I can get Neil to disagree with me here on this one. In my mind, I'd rather have a very basic tool that is fully deployed, the team knows how to operate it and run it. I would rather have that much more than some machine learning tool that the team doesn't know how to do it. It's spinning off so much noise that they just ignore it. And they didn't have enough budget. It was so expensive that they can't afford to fully implement it. And it's so complicated that you don't have the right engineering people to run it. For me, I would rather simple. I very much follow the, boring technology. Security needs some good old fashioned boring technology that's consistent, predictable, that just works, that people know how to respond and support it, rather than some fancy thing. Now, some security vendor may not like all of that, but in my mind, like day in and day out, you guys, having that kind of those fundamentals of just practicing that daily is so much more important than something else.
I think getting the basics right is indeed super, super important. And Moudy, I want to return to something that we were talking about earlier with regards to patterns, right? We've analyzed in the book so many mega breaches and 9,000 other reported breaches to date. So whether it was Target, JP Morgan Chase, OPM, Equifax, Yahoo, Capital One, Facebook, whoever was getting breached, between that and the 9,000 other reported breaches, it turned out that there were 6 root causes at the heart of them. And those 6 root causes are phishing, malware, software vulnerabilities, third-party compromise or abuse, unencrypted data, and inadvertent employee mistakes. If you focus on putting in the basic countermeasures to thwart those 6 root causes of breach, you will be in an amazingly better place. Your chances of getting breached will significantly reduce by getting the basics right. To also just talk a little bit about seatbelts, the seatbelt to us seems obvious, straightforward, the most basic thing. I think there was also an evolution over time. It was, if you look at when cars were first invented, to when Volvo introduced the first lap and shoulder seatbelt as we know it today. We have the exact year in the book. I believe it was in the 50s or 60s. But basically, that had to come to fruition. It was first an optional. It was an optional feature on most cars, and it was 10 years after that that federal regulation was put in place saying that you need to wear it. So, you know, what seems basic to us today may have seemed, you know, more complicated, like, well, why would you put the seatbelt? It wasn't even socially acceptable in the 60s and 70s.
I mean, even in the 80s, you know, that's a great point, Neil. I mean, even in the 80s, I remember growing up, it was generally not used that much then. You know, the car wasn't dinging at you and things like that.
It took me months to get my parents to use the seatbelt.
I didn't think about it like that. That's almost like 100 years of the car, practically.
Long time.
So the hope is that the world's moving.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say the hope is that the world's moving faster today, but you look at the big breaches that are still taking place, and you know,
like
maybe we're still in the midst of discovering you know what should be the basics.
Right.
So Moudy, I think got me about halfway there towards disagreeing with him.
I really wanted you
That's
guys
a
to.
more balanced position.
Yeah.
I wanted to see a fight.
Little virtual Zoom slap fight.
Oh, well, we had a lot of good debates as we were writing the book, I'll tell you.
I bet.
Yeah, we'll talk to Zoom and get some of those analogies going. Yeah, my takeaway with all that, Paul, first of all, guys, great answer. And Paul, I think there's an opportunity here for seatbelt automation to Moody's point. So we're going to do it, not you. We're going to make the big bucks with seatbelt automation.
There you go.